When we think of major disasters, we think of pure tragedy, right? Immense loss and destruction. But what if one of the most infamous fires in history was actually a blessing in disguise? Today, we're going to talk about the Great Fire of London and how it didn't just destroy a city, it might have actually saved it.
So to really get this story, you have to picture London in 1666. And trust me, it is not the city you're thinking of today. We're talking about a place just overflowing with waste, where rats were just an everyday thing. It was crowded, it was disease-ridden, it was absolutely filthy. This was a city just waiting for a spark.
And that grim reality, well, it really set the stage for a catastrophe. Before a single flame was even lit, 17th century London wasn't just dirty, it was, a ticking time bomb. It was a city just primed to burn.
And here's the thing. All these problems were connected. The buildings were made of wood, basically just kindling, and they were all crammed together on these super narrow, winding streets. That overcrowding, it made it incredibly easy for diseases to spread. And the garbage just piled up everywhere, which of course created the perfect home for all those rats. London wasn't just a city, it was a tinderbox.
Now, this wasn't some act of nature, like a lightning strike or a volcano. This was a completely man-made disaster. The whole thing started with a single spark in a baker's oven. So you've got simple human error in a city that was already primed for disaster by years of human neglect, and that one little mistake was about to change absolutely everything. So when that spark finally caught, it didn't just start a little fire. It unleashed an absolute inferno. The blaze that followed would be so devastating it would pretty much swallow London whole and completely reshape it forever. And the scale of this destruction, it's just staggering. The fire wiped out a massive 80% of the entire city. Let that sink in. 4/5 of London, just gone. Homes, churches, famous landmarks, all of it reduced to ash. Now, with that level of catastrophe, you'd expect the human cost to just be immense, right? But this is where the story gets really weird. This is the central paradox. Despite 80% of the city being completely leveled, only a handful of deaths were ever officially recorded. It's an almost unbelievable statistic, and it's our first big clue that this event was about way more than just destruction. Because what came next wasn't really defined by loss, but by opportunity. You see, from the ashes of that old, dirty city, London suddenly had a chance to rebuild itself from the ground up. And the change was fundamental. I mean, look at this. Before the fire, London was just this maze of flammable wooden buildings. After, the city mandated that everything be built from fireproof brick and stone. Those narrow, crowded alleys were replaced with much wider, more open streets. This wasn't just rebuilding. It was a total rethinking of how a city should even work. The fire basically acted as a giant reset button. With all the old, dangerous structures gone, they could pass new building codes that required fireproof materials. And at the same time, the streets got wider and the buildings were spaced further apart. These changes didn't just help prevent future fires. They made the entire city healthier and safer to live in. But the most incredible consequence of the fire wasn't architectural at all. It's almost hard to believe, but the same flames that destroyed London also delivered an unexpected cure for its deadliest disease. You have to remember, before the fire, London was in the grip of the bubonic plague. And really think about that for a second. A fatal disease had already killed 1/6 of the city's entire population. And it was all being spread by fleas that lived on those very same rats we talked about, the ones that were thriving in London's filthy conditions. The impact was immediate and just dramatic. As you can see here, before the fire, the plague was this devastating epidemic. After the fire, it virtually disappears. This timing is no coincidence at all. The fire succeeded where all of their medicine had failed. So, how did it happen? Well, it's brutally simple, really. The fire was basically a citywide sterilization event. It burned through all the garbage, the slums, and the cramped wooden houses. And in doing so, it destroyed the habitats of the rats and killed the massive flea population that carried the disease. The very thing that made the city a tinderbox was also what was keeping it so sick. So, with safer buildings and the plague finally gone, London was able to enter a whole new era. The focus shifted to public safety, and that paved the way for the modern city that we recognize today. The fire forced people to actually pay attention. For the very first time, the city created official building codes. They organized garbage pickup, which led to a much, much cleaner London. And, of course, they got a whole lot better at firefighting. These weren't just small tweaks. These were huge systemic changes that improved public health and safety for everyone and laid the groundwork for the city we know today. And that brings us to a quote that really just sums up this whole incredible story. It seems shocking, right, to call an event that destroyed 80% of a city a blessing? But when you really stop and weigh what was lost against what was gained, it's honestly hard to argue with that. The fire gave London a clean slate. It completely wiped away a city that was unsafe, unsanitary, and falling apart, allowing Londoners to build something cleaner, stronger, and far more resilient right in its place. It leaves us with a pretty fascinating question to think about, doesn't it? The story of the Great Fire of London suggests that sometimes the most profound progress can come from the most complete destruction. Can a total reset, even a devastating one, ultimately be a force for positive change? Thanks for digging into this with me.